Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're uncovering something, well, honestly, truly extraordinary about how our bodies function, and it revolves entirely around the surprising biological power of silence. We so often think of health in terms of what we actively do, right? What we eat, how we exercise, the supplements or medications we take. But what if the sheer absence of input is just as critical? Today, we are focusing on exactly why silence dramatically improves heart health and, as a huge bonus, transforms our brains in the process. To figure that out, I want to challenge you for a second. Try to guess what an Italian doctor accidentally stumbled upon back in 2006. His name was Luciano Bernardi. He was a professor of internal medicine and actually an amateur musician on the side. He set out to study exactly what different styles of music do to the human body. So he wired up his volunteers and played them 6 distinct styles of music, ranging from super slow ragas all the way to fast techno, and he meticulously tracked their heart rate, their blood pressure, and their breathing.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the study takes a completely wild turn. Between the different music tracks, Bernardi inserted a 2-minute pause of pure silence. Now, it was just a control, a boring little spacer meant to reset everyone's vitals back to a neutral baseline before the next song kicked in. But when the silence hit, his volunteers didn't just return to their baseline, they actually dropped below it. Their heart rate slowed down, their blood pressure fell, and they relaxed way more deeply in those empty 2-minute gaps than they did during the most gentle, soothing music Bernardi could possibly find.
So the boring control condition literally hijacked the entire study, and Bernardi did what any great scientist does, right? He followed the data. He completely threw out his original premise about music and published a paper on the profound cardiovascular impacts of silence. And the absolute irony here? That paper became the single most downloaded article in Heart, which is a premier journal read by top cardiologists all over the world. Literally, a filler condition became a massive, game-changing revelation for heart health. Section 1. How noise harms the heart. To truly wrap our heads around why silence is such powerful medicine for the cardiovascular system, we first have to look at its exact opposite. We really need to explore how noise physically harms the heart.
Let's walk through this physiological chain reaction step by step. When a sound wave enters your ear, it hits the eardrum, rattles 3 tiny bones, and activates the spiral-shaped organ called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea are these microscopic hair cells that turn those physical vibrations into electrical signals. Now, here is the absolutely critical part. Some of those signals go straight to your amygdala, the threat processing center of the brain. When you hear unwanted noise, the amygdala essentially panics and triggers your body to release cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart works harder and it pumps faster.
Now, once in a while, that kind of stress response is perfectly fine. It's just your survival system doing its job. But the hidden cardiovascular threat we face today is chronic exposure. Think about it. The constant low hum of traffic, the buzz of your office HVAC unit, the relentless pinging of notifications on your phone. This everyday noise keeps those stress chemicals trickling around the clock. Over time, that steady drip of cortisol and adrenaline literally wears out the microscopic cells lining your blood vessels. Silence is the exact remedy that halts this wear and tear, allowing the heart rate to finally settle and blood pressure to fall.
Section 2. Brain growth and mental clarity. So we know silence calms the body, but a calm cardiovascular system actually sets the stage for a sharper mind. Let's shift our focus from the heart up to the brain.
In this fascinating 2021 cognitive experiment, researchers had people perform pretty demanding mental tasks under 3 different conditions, with speech in the background, with standard noise, and in total silence. Look at these results across the board. The silent group came out ahead on nearly every single measure. They had better accuracy, stronger memory, and reported a much lower sense of mental effort. And when researchers actually checked their stress hormones, the silent workers had the lowest cortisol levels of all 3 groups, meaning their hearts were under far, far less strain.
Brain scientists actually have a pretty good clue as to why this happens. It involves something called the default mode network. This is basically your brain's daydreaming network, the system that quietly hums away when you're just staring out a window and letting your mind drift. It does massive heavy lifting for our creativity, self-reflection, and even imagining the future. But when researchers played loud noise at people inside a brain scanner, this entire network got suppressed. Silence is the biological condition that allows our deepest inner thinking and creativity to finally come through without being aggressively shoved aside by external noise. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that silence doesn't just clear the mind, it physically builds the brain. A researcher at Duke University named Imke Kirst was exposing mice to different sounds, and once again, silence was just supposed to be the control group. But she found that 2 hours a day of quiet produced the largest, most durable growth of completely new brain cells in the hippocampus, which is the region responsible for memory and learning. Silence literally grew new neurons better than any sound they tested. No way, right?
So why would absolutely nothing cause brain growth? Well, in the wild, total silence almost never happens. It's actually deeply unnatural. So the brain interprets this sudden, profound quiet as a form of eustress, basically good stress. The auditory cortex switches on, actively anticipating a sound, and it builds new cells to listen closer. It proves that silence is not just some empty void. It's a highly active biological workout that literally forces your brain to upgrade its own hardware.
Section 3. The Strategic 3-Second Pause. Let's bring all this hard science down to our actual daily lives. How can we use the biology of silence practically, especially in high-stakes, stressful environments?
I really want you to stamp this number in your memory. 3. It only takes 3 seconds of silence to create massive advantages, even if those 3 seconds feel agonizingly awkward in the moment. MIT researchers studied real-world negotiations and found that when people simply stopped and said absolutely nothing for at least 3 seconds, major breakthroughs happened. And this applies everywhere. Teachers who wait 3 seconds after asking a question get vastly richer answers. Therapists use 3-second pauses all the time because the silence is where the real truth finally bubbles up and gets spoken. So, the crucial point is understanding what exactly happens in the brain during those 3 seconds. Normally, in an argument or a tough negotiation, we default to what's called fixed pie thinking. It's a pure win-lose, highly defensive reflex where you feel instantly pressured to respond. But injecting a brief, quiet gap knocks people right out of that defensive reflex. It shifts the brain into a slower, much more deliberate mode of thought, where both sides stop fighting over the same pie and start hunting for creative ways to grow it. Plus, and this goes back to our main theme, dropping that defensive reflex instantly spares your heart from an unnecessary damaging spike of adrenaline.
Section 4. Perfect silence does not exist. But as we chase all these amazing benefits for our heart, our brain, and our conversations, we run into a really fascinating philosophical realization about the very nature of quiet. Back in 1951, the brilliant composer John Cage visited Harvard's anechoic chamber. Now, this is a room engineered to absorb absolutely every echo, designed to be as close to perfectly silent as physically possible. He stepped inside, totally expecting a pure void. Instead, he heard 2 distinct sounds, one high and one low. The engineer later explained to him that the high sound was Cage's own nervous system operating, and the low sound was his literal blood pumping through his veins. Cage famously walked out of there and realized, "Until I die, there will be sounds."
So perfect, external silence? It doesn't really exist. And even if it did, your brain wouldn't allow it. Neuroscientist Robert Satori points out that psychologically, perfect silence is impossible, because the brain always fills the gap. Think about it. If a song suddenly stops playing, you still hear it playing in your head, note for note. This uniquely human ability to playfully replay sounds, rehearse upcoming conversations, and generate our own internal audio is actually the very engine of our creativity.
Section 5. Tuning into life. So if absolute, pure silence is biologically and physically impossible, what are we really going after here? We are after the absence of noise. We want to clear away all that external clutter so we can finally tune in to the true signals of our own life.
And the good news is, no, you don't need to pack up and move to a monastery. Research points to needing roughly 2 hours of accumulated quiet across your entire day to really start seeing these incredible physiological effects on your heart and your brain. And this brilliantly illustrates how you can actually stack those 2 hours in small, super practical pieces throughout your day. Just start your morning without screens for the first 10 minutes. Take a walk without your earbuds and let that default mode network finally do its thing. Leave small silent gaps between your daily tasks instead of immediately firing up a podcast or the TV. Or try simply sitting and listening to the silence of a room exactly the way you would sit and intentionally listen to a favorite song, just absorbing whatever comes up.
You know, this isn't just modern science, it's ancient wisdom. 800 years ago, the great poet Rumi wrote, "Listen to the silence, he has much to say." Modern cardiology and neuroscience have finally, amazingly, caught up to this profound truth. We now know for a fact that listening to the silence physically lowers our blood pressure,
calms our stressed-out hearts, and literally builds a bigger, sharper brain.
When we cultivate a calm heart and a clear mind, we finally give ourselves the space to explore life's deepest questions. The source material for this explainer touches on this incredible documentary called Final Hours, which explores near-death experiences. When people are brought back from the absolute brink, it forces a profound, often life-changing evaluation of how they spend their time and how they treat others. Silence allows us to have that exact same contemplation without needing a terrifying near-death experience. It gives us the mental gap required to honestly evaluate our own lives. Which brings us to our final thought. The deep quiet we've been exploring today is exactly what prepares us to ask the ultimate questions humans have been asking forever. Stripped of the daily noise, equipped with a healthy heart and a sharply focused mind, ask yourself, what is this life actually for? And are you living it fearlessly? I challenge you, find your 2 hours of silence today and see what answers come through. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.